And by the way, I have started the meeting officially just so people can know that, there's not something wrong with the link. So we've had 3 former presidents of Poland speak to the club. We've also, including
Which ones?
President Wałęsa, President Komorowski, and President Kwaśniewski. And President Wałęsa we brought to UT in person, and we had 500 people there.
Oh.
So we've also had the current U.S. ambassador to Poland speak to the club, and so I want you to know that you're in good company.
Oh, that's for sure. Oh my goodness. Ambassador Brzezinski did that?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, you're a great leader to bring this set of leaders before the students that are members of your association. So that speaks very well of you, Nathan.
Well, thank you very much. So if you don't mind, I think we can go ahead and get started. So I'm just gonna start with an introductory speech. So welcome everyone. My name is Nathan Silverstein. I'm the founder and president of the Polish Club at the University of Texas at Austin. Today's event is being hosted by the Polish Club at UT, a registered student organization. This is not an event sponsored by the University of Texas at Austin. The views expressed today are of the invited guest speaker and do not represent the views of the student organization, the university, or its officers. This event is being recorded and will be posted on the Polish Club's website, where we have a virtual library with recordings of all our past guest speakers. I would like to thank our co-sponsors, UT Center for Russian, East European, and Eurasian Studies, the Center for European Studies, Liberal Arts Honors, the Department of Government, the Department of International Relations and Government, and the Strauss Center for International Security and Law. I'm excited to introduce today's speaker, the longest-serving Congresswoman in U.S. history, Representative Marcy Kaptur. Congresswoman Kaptur was born in Toledo, Ohio. She is of Polish descent. The Congresswoman earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, her master's in urban planning from the University of Michigan, and later did doctoral studies at MIT. Congresswoman Kaptur was first elected to Congress in 1982. She represents Ohio's 9th District. Representative Kaptur is a member of the House Appropriations Committee and almost 10 caucuses. Most notably for today's event, she is the co-founder and co-chair of the House Poland Caucus, the co-founder and co-chair of the House Ukraine Caucus, and a member of the House Caucus on Central and Eastern Europe. For the first 25 minutes of today's event, we will watch a short documentary entitled Freedom Means Never Surrender. The documentary, which Congresswoman Kaptur was involved in producing, tells the story of 2 brave Polish citizens who survived World War II and achieved the American dream after immigrating to the U.S. post-war. After viewing the mini-film, Congresswoman Kaptur will take moderated Q&A for around 30 minutes. It is my honor to now welcome a great American leader, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you to all of those who are members of your association for this time together today. I will try to make it useful to you and productive to you. If I could recommend a book, if you haven't read it in your classes, I would probably recommend the book Bloodlands by Dr. Timothy Snyder. Dr. Snyder is a professor at Yale University and an Ohioan by birth. But he, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, 1991, right in that period, was able to draw material from the Soviet archives in all of the various countries that had lived under the terrible mantle of the Soviet Union. And so there were young scholars like yourselves that were identified, and now the archives have been closed again, but he drew forth a lot of information that is contained in that book, Bloodlands. And I have read a great deal about European history. Our family obviously immigrated to America a century and a half ago, so it's not, I'm not a recent immigrant. I was born in the United States of America. I'm the 2nd generation, but we were always curious about our history. And I'll just say to the students before you begin the film, that it's really important to know your heritage and to remember how it is that you have freedom, that you have liberty as an American. It didn't start with you. It's a beneficent endowment that comes from prior generations. Don't ever be cut off from your heritage. Know what it is, understand what it is, and it will take you around the world, I guarantee you.
Thank you very much for those introductory remarks, Congressman Kaptur. I'm going to go ahead and now share the video. And Congressman, if you could just let me know if it's coming through loud and clear, the video. I'm going to start playing it now.
Right.
On September 1st, 1939, World War II began. Poland was the front line. Poland's motto, "For your freedom and ours." What follows is the story of an exceptionally heroic couple whose lives spanned 2 continents.
Is that coming through all right?
For me, it is.
Okay, great. Well, if it's coming through for you, then it means it's probably coming through for everybody else. So I'm going to keep playing it.
2009 speech, Mokra, Poland. Marian Wojciechowski, age 95. 70th anniversary of the Battle of Mokra, September 1st, 1939. At the monument to the Valhinian Cavalry Brigade, dedicated to all those who fought in the Battle of Mokra.
Walka o ojczyznę nie jako coś specjalnego. To jest obowiązek każdego Polaka.
In 1918, to rebuild a war-torn Europe, President Woodrow Wilson advocated for a free and independent Poland. United by their belief in freedom, the citizens of the United States and Poland would dedicate their lives to the defense of liberty. It was once said that Poles possessed the freedom gene, no matter the time or place. My name is Craig Wojciechowski, and I live both with that gene and within the land of the free and the home of the brave, the United States of America. For my grandfather and grandmother, my Jaja and Busha, freedom was not always so easily exercised. Marian Wojciechowski and Władysława Punicki lived a life in Poland that epitomized the motto of Poland, "For your freedom and ours." Marian served in the Polish cavalry, fought and suffered in the Second World War. Władysława served as a girl guide in the gray ranks of the Muri and in the partisan underground in Warsaw. What I did not fully understand were the sacrifices they made until our splendid adventure to Poland. Along with our family friend, United States Representative Marcy Kaptur, we traveled the country of my heritage, a walking embodiment of the Polish-American bond. It was a moving and enlightening experience. On one stop, what was for me just a hill by some train tracks with blueberries growing on it, was for my Jaja something much, much more. It was a reminder of the armored trains, the brave soldiers, and the valiant cavalry. Along this journey, I also witnessed buildings that displayed graffiti, replacing the antagonistic symbols towards the Nazis painted there by the Girl Guides, an early organization similar to the later-day Girl Scouts. The Kotwica symbol painted on these structures, which stood for Polska Walczewska, a fighting Poland, was a brave defiance by my Busha, who was a Girl Guide during the Nazi invasion of Poland. My Jaja and Busha, like countless other Polish and American citizens, sacrificed much, so much for the cause of freedom. Their story, and especially the story of my grandparents, must be told.
Did this really happen so many years ago from this day? How quickly the pages of history turn. Near this very spot, had I not found a simple hole in the ground, the German shell would have ended all that I was and ever would be.
What you're about to hear is our story. And while many of the faces and places you will see are not a direct reflection of our journey, they do represent the era in which we lived. We were simply ordinary people in an extraordinary time.
My name is Marian Wojciechowski.
My name is Władysława Poniecka. Freedom means
never surrender. Our beloved Poland. Near the end of the 18th century, the Polish state faded as the nation of the world and was partitioned among Prussia, Austria, and the Russian Empire. Then in 1918, from the ruin of so-called war to end all wars, Poland rose again from the ashes. We were born into a new generation and was to lead the Polish people in an era of hope, opportunity, and freedom. But it was not to be, for the clouds of war were again on the horizon.
Er hat jetzt in seiner Hand Frieden oder Krieg. Er wird als jeder Frieden Angebot jetzt akzeptieren und den Deutschen endliche Freiheit geben. Oder wir werden diese Freiheit entholen. Ich gehe in meinem Volk jetzt voran als der erste Soldat. Hinter mir!
I look back on my life as a young girl, enjoying scouting, and then having to use the skills I learned in this peacetime organization to becoming an active partisan in 1940 in Warsaw. My daily life turned to merely surviving in a terrifying society that did not respect the people of Poland. I became a 19-year-old woman that used anti-Nazi leaflets and correspondences as a member of the Grey Ranks, Szare Szeregi, to do my patriotic duty.
I came from the poor farming community in Poland called Polaniec, on the same soil where American Revolutionary War General Tadeusz Kościuszko was known to reside. I earned money tutoring during my high school years so I could attend the Warsaw School of Economics. I was interested in various political directions and social problems, trying to find answers to questions how we should manage our country in order to improve the welfare of the people. I was able to get a job as assistant of the secretary in the Union of Agriculture and Economic Cooperatives, learning about wheat product purchase, cleaning, milling, and sales.
As a young woman from the city of Warsaw, I spent my days with my girlfriends at school and many enjoyable excursions as a member of the Girl Guides, known as Girl Scouts today. I had wonderful parents and your typical brothers. I especially loved when my mom would braid my hair. We would spend our days in Warsaw, shopping, and spend time with friends like most young girls in our teen years. In the months prior to September 1st, 1939, I was an aide at the Institute of Deaf and Mute Children, but I did not imagine that it would not be long before I would be practicing the oath I took as a scout years ago and be delivering bread to the needy and using my first aid skills on people that needed my care.
I have always loved horses, and it was also during this time that I joined officer school and was assigned to the 21st Regiment of the Nadwiślański Lancers. Fighting for one's country is not something special. It is the duty of every Pole. The Germans were to the west and the Russians were to the east. We were stuck in the middle, fighting on two fronts. As a young man, I joined the Wojtyńska Cavalry Brigade. While history praises our battles, the combined juggernaut of the German and Russian armies were too much for the brave soldiers of Poland. Hundreds of thousands of Poles, soldiers, and civilians were deported to labor camps in Russia, forced to suffer inhumane conditions. Many Poles would die under Soviet rule. This was a dark time for Poland.
In preparation for the imminent invasion by the Germans into Warsaw, I saw an obligation as a young woman to contribute by joining the Grey Ranks and spending many hours moving in the darkness of night to distribute anti-Nazi leaflets or leaflets giving false information. As a łączniczka or courier, I now risked my own life and the life of my entire family.
Once again, my beloved country faded from the eyes of the world, but not from the heart of the people. My order was, bury the ammunition, give the horses and uniforms to the peasants, change into civilian clothes, march home, and await further orders. The resistance had begun. Freedom means never surrender.
In Warsaw, like many other cities in Poland, the resistance meant risking being caught by the Gestapo. That was exactly what happened to me in 1940 while being a courier. I was taken to Mokorów headquarters, which was a Gestapo detention center. I would remain there for 3 months. On various occasions, they would take me to 25 Aleja Szucha Street, a building taken over by the Gestapo, and placed me in a cell referred to as a tram. They would torture me and others to provide information. I would then be returned to Mokorów. I refused to betray my fellow partisans or my Poland.
While secretly part of the resistance as a young Weimar, I continued to work at the Union of Agriculture and Economic Cooperatives, now under the German authority. This position allowed me the freedom of travel and a clear understanding of food shipments, or more importantly, of what amount of food shipments could disappear without Germans noticing. Food was distributed in secret to those in need. Trusted contacts were made and information was spread throughout occupied Poland. It was a dangerous time. Many did not survive.
Because of my refusal to cooperate with the Gestapo, I was sent to Pawiak prison in Warsaw. Again and again, I was tortured on a regular basis for not providing information. This torture lasted 21 months. My defiance toward the questions directed at me only made me more determined to never surrender and relinquish my freedom as a Pole.
In 1942, I was assisting a reconnaissance operative. A member was captured and later executed, but letters addressed to me fell into the hands of Gestapo. When one ends up in the hands of Gestapo, death could be considered a better alternative to the pain and suffering they inflicted. I was beaten so thoroughly that after finishing, they threw me into a cell completely disabled. But for all the weakness of my body, my spirit was never stronger. I would not give up, my fellow Poles. Freedom means never surrender.
It was 1942, and I was transported to Ravensbrück concentration camp north of Berlin, Germany. This concentration camp was for women only. It was there that I became a member of the Mury, or the Walls. It was an underground resistance Girl Scout group in the camp. My torture was inflicted by a doctor, who was more like a butcher. I was one of the women that were referred to as króliki, or in English, rabbits, because of the experimentation done on us. It was horrific. They would either slice parts of our bodies and infect them with bacteria for pseudo-medical experiments, or, like myself, have caustic injections inserted into my body and then wait to record the results. I lived with those physical and mental scars my entire life. How can humans be so cruel to one another? As a member of the Mury and a subtroop of that called Cementy, which stood for the cement that helped hold the walls together, I helped many of the women too weak to care for themselves, because we only had each other. I was one of the fortunate ones saved from the bunkier, which was a cell for more severe punishment, by Anna Burda Welburdowna. When she changed my paperwork, which got me sent to Flossenburg concentration camp. I was sure to die from more experiments if I remained at Ravensbrück. 1 year of my life was left at Ravensbrück, but I survived. I refused to die.
Auschwitz, Gross-Rosen, Litmetz, all concentration camps, all hell on earth. Through small miracles, too many to count, Almighty God helped me in these oppressions, and I survived. In the spring of 1945, we could hear the bombs bursting as the Russian army approached. Whole columns of prisoners were being marched to the west. On May 5th, 1945, I was included in such a column. It was known that any prisoner who no longer had the strength to continue were finished off with a rifle shot and left by the roadside. Therefore, at the first occasion during the night, I escaped.
Refusing to die, I arrived at Flossenburg. I left Ravensbrück, where 92,000 women died, to this subcamp, where before the end of the war, 33,000 more of us would die. I knew the war must be coming to an end by the uneasy demeanor of the guards. I was part of the group that was selected for a death march to New Rollo, a different subcamp of Ravensbrück. As I walked along with the other women, anyone that lagged behind was killed by the Nazi guard. I was not going to give them that pleasure of watching me die. Myself and a few other women waited for the right moment and broke from the lines and escaped before we would get to Przekary in Czechoslovakia.
After much hiding and running, I finally stepped onto free soil in Hamburg. I arrived in the displaced person camp run by the United States Army. I immediately wanted to join the effort to rebuild a war-torn world. I became a lieutenant in the Polish Guard companies, coordinating with the American Army in Germany. I also served as a leader in a Polish and international refugee organization. But most importantly, I met my beloved wife and partner in all I will ever do, Władysława.
Never giving up hope that I would one day find peace in my life, myself and the other women were hiding in a barn in the village of Przekary. We were discovered and liberated by a Polish US soldier from Texas. We were taken to a displaced persons camp in Germany, and my new life began. when I met this wonderfully kind man, Marian Wojciechowski. The year was 1945. It is from this point forward that I will no longer be an I, but rather a we. Our young daughter Marianne, Hania, was born in the displaced persons camp in Aschenberg, Germany. She was named after Anna Burda, who changed my paperwork at Flossenburg.
Then, in 1950, with our young daughter Marianne, we boarded the USS Bletchford and set sail for America. Our names written at Ellis Island marked a new chapter in our history, and though we had a new home, we would never lose our beloved Poland. We settled in Toledo and embarked on the life we sacrificed ourselves for. We traded our weapons and leaflets for words of Polish pride and identity. These words were printed in the American Echo, a newspaper dedicated to embracing the Polish spirit that we were part of in Toledo. In 1957, we were naturalized as United States citizens, and now we're a family of two nations. We proceeded to use our experiences to promote Toledo as a community that welcomes everyone. I was even informally known by many Toledoans as the godfather of the Old West End for administering programs to support the area's urban renewal. For me, I work to revitalize and invest in our communities. All the while, we led Polish organizations to cultivate Polish traditions and support our brave homeland. You see, our American dream was to continue to fight for Poland's total independence and secure her freedom from Russian tyranny. And in 1989, 44 years after being occupied and brutalized by the Soviets, our dream came true. Poland became free.
Our beautiful family grew, adding two boys, Lucian and John, as brothers to Marianne. Yet I never forgot what enabled me to survive those horrible 5 years. I reunited with other surviving scouts, harcerki, and was elected commander of the Polish Girl Scouts in the USA. I taught Polish language classes and wrote about my survival in Poland. It is my hope that our lives and lives of those who were lost in the horrors of war be a testament to liberty, so that history will never forget what it means. In the twilight of our lives, we have lived, laughed, and loved.
Although we have seen war, been prisoners, buried a son and countless friends, and lived with a mental torture and pain that came without treatment in the concentration camps, we have been truly blessed. Life, like freedom, means never surrender.
My Busha passed away in 1992, followed by my Jaja in 2011. They now rest in peace, together, side by side at Mount Carmel Cemetery in Toledo, Ohio. They were honored by Poles and Americans alike. Eternally, they are a symbol of the unity among the righteous. They never stopped giving back to the freedom they earned and loved by helping others. One should never forget the warmth and kindness they shared with others, even though the hardships took a toll on their memories, caused by the flashbacks of torture, pain, and suffering. As the Book of Wisdom reads, "The souls of the just are in the hand of God, and no torment shall touch them. For if before men indeed they be punished, they shall be greatly blessed, because God tried them and found them worthy of himself." Busha and Jaja are the bravest couple I will ever know, even though they now rest with the just and the worthy. Their legacy will live on in all of us forever.
This program was made possible by the Anastasia Fund and the Polish Cultural Center of Northwest Ohio, also by viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, the remainder of the credits are available online, but for the sake of time, I think we're gonna go to the Q&A section of the program, unless Congresswoman Kaptur, if you have anything you want to add. I mean, in my opinion, a very moving film.
Thank you very much. Thank you for showing it to learn more about the history of the world through the history of individuals who have lived it. And also to say that if you have a chance to look at the credits later, at the very end, Colonel Wojciechowski makes a statement that I think is important. So just be aware. He was then 95, imagine. Because his English was not perfect, all right, I had the great privilege of traveling with him. He took me through his life. And that's where we had some of the pictures and films, because I could never completely understand all the parts. And I realized how much history we've lost. And my first major was history in my when I worked on my bachelor's degree. So I have a great respect for it. And I realized how, for this part of the world, Central Europe, how much of the history was lost because of the people who lived it. And of course, Russians, the Soviets, in the period he lived in, killed over 23,000 Polish leaders from all walks of life at a place called Katyn Forest, Smolensk, Russia today. And so I realized the historical gap, because they weren't there. The intellectuals weren't there. You can even tell this couple had more education than most, but their lives were shattered, and they had to restart in a foreign land where they didn't command the language, and that was so hard to do. So they maintained their sanity, but the history of that part of the world is so much of the precious stories have been lost, and there are many museums in Poland now and adjoining countries that try to save the pieces, the shards of history. And for the Jewish community in Poland, the same was true. There are some people who consider themselves Polish Jews. There were others who were Jewish who lived in what was called the ghetto in those days. Poland was the only country in Europe that allowed the Jewish people to have a body of law, to have their own governance structure. You can read all about that. But the point is, 3 million Polish Christians, 3 million Jews living in Poland, some Polish Jews, some Jewish citizens were obliterated. So all those stories, all of that history, gone. And Poland has had to create museums. There are many beautiful museums in Poland now trying to understand the history. It took me almost 50 years to get this information just on this one couple. Because every time, for example, the father would speak with me, unfortunately, his daughter would then tell me that he would have terrible nightmares. So even to produce, he had to give so much of himself to try to tell the story. They were shocked that I would even be interested in their story. I'm their representative. I'm their representative to Congress. And to understand the stories of these families touched me to my very heart. So I just say to you, as young people in our country, as future leaders of our country, pay attention to history, pay attention to your place in it. You obviously have this club in Austin, Texas. Your congressman in Austin is Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas. You might have him invited to a ceremony and show him this film, because we have to educate the American people about the role of Poland in the contemporary world. So this is a basis. This is a way of understanding how you connect to the broader world of which you're a part. And there are millions of stories like their story. Most will remain untold. So what I did, working with at the national level with General Mark Milley, who retired as the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of our government, of our Department of Defense, about 2 years ago, I traveled to Poland with him and with a large contingent of our people from our country, along with Ambassador Brzezinski, and we initiated something called Liberty Road. This film and the stories of 6 people that I've represented, a Jewish businessman, Philip Markowitz, a nurse in my community, Elizabeth Frankowski, we turned over to the Museum of the Warsaw Uprising 6 stories of individuals who had begun their life in Poland and whose families, fortunately, or these individuals saved some of their stories, and we turned it over to the Museum of the Warsaw Uprising. And we created something called Liberty Road, and that museum is now stop 1 on Liberty Road. And the idea was that Americans like yourselves who have an interest in Poland or history because of your family, that you would restore the stories of your family to that museum, and that we would begin to have a collaboration in the new generation of young people from Poland and young people from our country who can tell the stories of their families and make that a part of the history. So know that that exists. We have a formal agreement that was signed with the Museum of the Warsaw Uprising. So if you manage to travel there or study there, this is just good to know about. And the reference in the film to something that occurred at Połaniec, Poland, with Tadeusz Kościuszko. When he returned from America, he helped win our American Revolution, all right? When he returned to Poland, he wrote the first declaration for the freedom of the serfs because of what he had observed in our country with the system of slavery. So there's a great bondage between the United States and Poland in terms of the advancement of freedom on the face of the earth. And so that Połaniec Declaration in Poland is very, very important. And as the film states, when it was written, 3 adjoining empires erased Poland from the map of Europe for 125 years. So Poland has fought for its freedom as hard as the people of our country that threw off colonialism and have tried to build a nation from the shreds of former regimes. So I just thought I would point that out to you as a very important historical restoration that to this day remains to be enlarged upon. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman Kaptur, for all that you've done for Polish-American relations and to preserve this very important history and often painful history. So I'm now going to transition into the Q&A section of the program, and many of our attendees today had the opportunity to submit questions for you. And so I'm going to start off with a few more personal questions, if that's all right, just about your work. For example, how has your Polish heritage influenced your work in Congress?
As the film states, and this was Lech Wałęsa's statement, and you mentioned he was one of your speakers, there's something about being Polish that embeds deep in your heart a complete dedication to liberty. And so I never knew I would be a congresswoman. I'm the first person in my family ever to graduate from high school and then from college. This is the story of many Polish Americans who came here, their ancestors with nothing. And so it comes from a long heritage of understanding the sacrifice for liberty. My family, we have many veterans going back to World War I. I had an uncle who fought in White Russia against the Bolsheviks. in the U.S. Marine Corps before World War I. I had an uncle who fought in World War I, an uncle. All of our relatives were in combat. And so I come from a family that suffered for liberty. And that shaped me in ways as a young woman in our country back when I was going to school. There weren't many women in Congress. I never really thought I would be in the Congress, but my heritage shaped me. And a deeper understanding of what had been, and it isn't like our parents talked about this or our grandparents talked about this. They survived it. And I think that had a tremendous influence on me in ways that I didn't even fully understand when I was your age. And I went on to be relevant. And then when I was in college and had the privilege to go to college, John Kennedy was president. And when he made his inaugural address, he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country and what together we can do for the freedom of man." That's what he said. I remember that. It influenced me in college a lot. And I majored in history with a minor in economics, even though at that time that was really considered stupid, because how would you be employed as an historian? What would the job be? How would you use that? But I wanted to learn. I wanted to be relevant in my own time. And I actually have realized that dream. I've really been able to do that in my lifetime. I would encourage you to know yourselves, to know the history of your families and of your families in this country, and then to set a path to do something constructive in life, whatever that might be.
Thank you. To now transition to a few questions about the film we just watched. So as we saw from Freedom Means Never Surrender, Poland was one of the countries that suffered most from World War II. And recently we've seen the Polish government calling for war reparations from Germany. Do you support Poland's call for these reparations?
Well, that's a really difficult question because we have new boundaries of countries on the map of Europe. That really is a decision between the government of Poland on behalf of the people of Poland and the people of Germany and the government of Germany. Right now, my own personal feeling is because of what's happening in Europe and Russian interference in a new type of hybrid warfare, along with Iran, we don't need to upset Europe too much more than is already being done. I think we have to find ways to build bridges, whatever those might be, not walls. And I believe that under Vladimir Putin, Russia is rubbing salt on the wounds of places she well knows have not always had peace among the peoples there. And I am concerned about NATO and our ability to keep it strong. It really has been strengthened over the last several years. I urge you all, and I could send this to you, Nathan, if you're interested, a story about Omar Bradley, General Omar Bradley from Missouri, who's no longer living, but led U.S. forces to free Europe during World War II. It's important to look at that film and to think about the healing of wounds across the nations of Europe and to build bridges, not walls. So the restitution issue is one that can be fought legally. Structures can be set up to do that, but to do it in a way that builds bridges, not walls, in Europe, because there are forces on earth, particularly among the terrorist states, and I include Russia in that, Iran, what we see happening in the Middle East today with terrorist groups like Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, all funded by Iran in one way or another, that are going to places where there has been a struggle for liberty on behalf of free people, right? And Russia is working very hard to rub salt into the wounds to create conflict. So I don't want to create conflict with reparations. I think first there should be dialogue. First, commissions can be set up to work on this in a very legalistic way. Sometimes it's hard for the people of Poland to provide reparations when in fact property was taken from them too. And we have to figure out ways to build bridges, not walls, is my answer to that.
Absolutely. And you mentioned NATO, which segues nicely into my next question. And as we've seen in the wake of the war in Ukraine, that NATO is likely stronger now than at any other time in its history, and certainly probably most relevant. However, some worry about the US's future commitment to the alliance, which you also echoed. The question being, what can American policymakers like yourself do to ensure that the US maintains its leading and all-important role in the alliance?
Well, the most important thing is to elect Americans who will serve in our Congress, who will support America's hard-fought wars to achieve NATO and to achieve what this nation has led globally since the end of World War II. That's why I recommend the film on Omar Bradley. I'll have to make a note to myself to send that to you. And the context in which NATO was created out of the ashes of World War II. We have some members of Congress, shockingly, who do not support NATO. They do not support the United States' role in the world as the leader of the free world. And it is a moment of disbelief for me that we could even have Americans who run for office who believe this. In Texas, you have I'm a Democrat, but you have a Republican, Mike McCall. You should have Mr. McCall address your group, Congressman McCall. He is an excellent member of Congress, and I don't serve on the committees that he's on, but he and I both have a similar perspective on the critical role America must play in the defense of our closest allies in Europe, including Poland. When I recently visited Poland and I was in Rzeszów on the eastern side of Poland, I saw the American, because Poland is a member of NATO, that was a great moment when Poland became a member of NATO along with all the other Soviet republics that fell so that the people could grow into a life of liberty. And this doesn't happen overnight after what had happened in so many of those countries. I could see the US provided to NATO Patriot missile batteries all along the border of Poland. That is the scrimmage line for liberty in Europe today. Ukraine is fighting for her freedom. She is fighting so hard in Poland. You should be so, as Americans, so proud of her and look for ways to help her. Individual groups that are collecting items to distribute through Poland into Ukraine. As young people, think of a way that you can be helpful, even if it's sending school supplies in the classes that you're in, pens, paper, I send books, I send all kinds of things, shoes that Americans maybe have cast off because they didn't like the color or something and they're brand new, to find ways to send to Ukraine seeds so they can plant their gardens and feed their people. Can you imagine planting between shelling the shells that have fallen all over Poland and the landmines, or excuse me, over Ukraine and the landmines that are there? They're fighting for liberty, and NATO cannot directly go into Ukraine because Ukraine is not a member of NATO. She wishes to accede to NATO, but a promise was made to Ukraine many years ago in something called the Budapest Memorandum. You ought to read that. That Budapest Memorandum said that if Ukraine would free herself of nuclear weapons, she would be protected. We are not doing that. The world is not doing that. Russia violated the Budapest Memorandum, and frankly, we have some members of our Congress who are wavering in our commitment to Ukraine right now. So we have to strengthen that. And politically, you should pay attention to who's running for office, obviously, and you should support those who believe in a strong NATO and believe in this NATO alliance that has been won at such a great price of human life.
Thank you, Congresswoman Kaptur. Yes, you mentioned that lots of Americans and that there are even now members of Congress who don't necessarily recognize the importance of NATO and a free Europe. And in general, we see that a lot of Americans, especially those who don't come from, Eastern Europe and don't have Eastern European heritage, might not fully understand the importance of supporting Ukraine, for example, and the idea of supporting Ukraine might seem very far away and not relevant to their day-to-day lives. So could you maybe explain why, for a specifically American audience, why you think it's in their best interest to support Ukraine and NATO?
To build freedom forward, to allow people who are dying to be free the opportunity to build a strong nation. Ukraine is the largest landmass in Europe. It is a rich agricultural country, though it's the poorest nation in Europe. They've never been given a chance to really, they became free in 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine became a free country. It had elections 1991 forward. You can read about it. It's not easy to build a country. None of us have really had to do that. We inherited a great country and now we're taking it forward. But Ukraine has had to start from a level of poverty most Americans couldn't imagine. And yes, there were oligarchs over there and so forth, but look at how the average person lives over there. In the village life there, people still cook in limestone ovens. They don't have running water in their homes. I mean, it's the fact that they can fight the third largest military power in the world and survive over these 2 years of hell. Well, actually, the first invasion was 2014. The enlarged invasion occurred 2 years ago. That they've been able to survive those harsh winters and so forth. I think that people have to understand that Ukraine and its boundaries are the scrimmage line between tyranny and liberty in Europe today. And if they don't understand that, frankly, shame on them. But we need to make it understandable. And you know how we do that? We do that through people like you. There are Ukrainian Americans in Texas. Get them to come on social media and talk about what it was like to live under Soviet repression and Soviet tyranny. What was that like? Let them tell their personal stories. This is really critical. And the American people love liberty. They don't know about Ukraine. They don't speak the language. And just as with the couple whose film we looked at just now, when the Ukrainians came to our country, those that are here who fled, for example, they don't tell their stories. They're too busy surviving here, learning the language, trying to feed their families, trying to get a job. But their stories, their struggle, Americans would identify with that struggle. So something you could do would be to find 1 or 2 Ukrainian American families in Texas, maybe at your university. Let them tell their story. You could connect to Ukrainian universities. Lviv, there is Lviv University in Western Ukraine. There's also Kiev Mohyla, the finest educational institution at the university level in Ukraine. Arsenal and missiles fell just about a mile from it this week. And those are the best scholars Ukraine has. You could do internet connections if that's something your university could do and could help with and could let people tell their stories, not just of the bombing that's happening and of the drones that are coming in, and the people aren't leaving, they're staying through this hell that they are living, but to talk about what it's like to live under Russian rule. They know, and that is what they are trying to free themselves from.
I completely agree with you, and Congresswoman, I don't know if you know, but when our former vice president of the Polish club was actually a Ukrainian student here at UT who was born and raised in Ukraine, and some of his family is still there. So we are very proud to say that we stand with Ukraine. We do a lot to try to support Ukraine. Actually, one of the many ways that these events benefit not only people who are interested in learning about Poland, but also about Ukraine, is that we also use these events as a fundraiser. We ask attendees to, because it's not just students that attend these meetings, and to try to help donate to help support Ukraine. So absolutely. To kind of, backtrack, and I recognize that we're coming up on the hour here, and you've already been extremely generous with your time. So maybe just a final question or two here. To kind of backtrack to talking about the American-Polish alliance, current U.S. ambassador to Poland, the Honorable Mark Brzezinski, who has spoken to the club, and Congresswoman, who you told me you know well. He's frequently called the U.S.-Poland alliance a special friendship. Why do you think the U.S. and Poland share this exceedingly close bond and partnership?
Well, if you look back to the founding of our republic, two Polish generals, Kazimierz Pulaski and Tadeusz Kościuszko, came to America to lay out the war plans to throw off colonial Britain at the time. And so from the founding of our republic, we were influenced in our thinking about the Constitution, about human rights, by those generals. The book that was in the film, The Peasant Prince, is a good one to read, about the Tadeusz Kościuszko and what was going on when our country was first founded, because it's important to understand roots. Your roots as a person, our country's roots, where the values of liberty came from. And so because Poland, when Kościuszko and Pulaski, when they went back, they the Poignant Declaration was signed, and because Poland eliminated serfdom, at least tried to, on the continent of Europe, it was taken off the map of Europe. So just human worth, the worth of a human being, was an idea that was embedded in the Polish consciousness, and it was embedded in the minds of people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, James Madison. If you read our Constitution, if you read the amendments to our Constitution, where did those ideas come from that founded our country? I often marvel at our Constitution. 3 branches of government. They didn't trust the human genome because they knew that human beings make terrible mistakes, and that when they assume power, sometimes they're absolutely ruthless. And they tried to create a system where that couldn't happen. And so far, it's survived so far. But every election, every day, liberty's being tested. So I think the reason is it goes back so far. And then when Woodrow Wilson in the 20th century placed Poland back on the map of Europe, that built ties between us. And obviously our struggle during World War II, Poland remained an unfinished work. And then from 1946 until 1989, our country was utterly committed to helping to throw off the Soviet Union and to allow these nations that had been left unattended since World War II to access to the free world. And we have been successful till today in that effort. Our closest allies on the face of the earth that believe in democracy like we do are our European allies.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We're a minute past the hour, so I guess I'll ask you, do you have time for maybe one last question, or do you have to wrap up?
We can take one more.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And I'll ask a positive last question. Not that the other questions haven't been positive, but some of them are, as you mentioned, have been a little difficult, but this one I think ends things on a happy note. So as we know, Poland has played a leading role in supporting Ukraine, having offered asylum to more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees since Russia invaded. What do you think Poland's response to the war in Ukraine says about the Polish people, government, and what do you think about the call by some for Poland as a country to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize?
What an excellent idea. What an excellent idea. Poland has been extraordinary in welcoming the Ukrainians into their country. I traveled to Poland. I saw no evidence of this great humanitarian act on the part of Poles to welcome strangers into their homes. And it's really unbelievable. And the military risk they face for what they are doing. I just had an American return. I won't say who it is, but they raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for the railroads in Ukraine. This is an American business person who understands the Rotary clubs of our country that are raising money. I hope you share some of this with your Rotary clubs in Texas. The Rotary clubs have been outstanding in raising money across our country and providing portals to move product so that the Ukrainians can survive. individual Americans have been so generous. So I think that the American people, when we release the power, not just of the American government, but the American people, working with Poland, working through Poland, we can have so much more of an impact inside of Ukraine. And I don't think the American people realize when they do something, like I know one group that raised money so in this one town on the western side of Ukraine, they could build 2 little showers in a school so people could shower with hot water and just stay clean. When they realized that the money had come from the American people themselves, not necessarily the government, and I'm not against the government, don't get me wrong, but they said the American people care about us. Oh, wow. That brought plumbers out and carpenters who helped put the showers in, and it gave people hope. So I hope the American people know that others look to us to carry the flag of liberty forward with them.
Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman Kaptur, for your time. And I want to let you know that we look to you as a role model, as an inspiration, and as a champion for the cause of freedom. So thank you very much for your time again and for being here with us today.
Thank you, Nathan. And you don't know, you give me hope and all the members of your club, because I worry about what will the next generation see? What will they know? How will they carry liberty forward? Who will be prepared to lead? And you strike me as a very talented, caring young man. And those that belong to your club, which is they choose, it's a self-choice to belong. You couldn't be devoting your energies to any more important place and cause. Thank you. All the best to you. Graduate, get your degrees. If you have to scrub floors to get your degrees, graduate from college and make a positive contribution to your families, to your communities, and to our country in the cause of liberty.
Well, thank you very much. I wish you a great rest of your day, and thank you again for everything.
Thank you very much. All right. Tell your parents they did a good job.
All right. Bye-bye.